Hi, I'm Liv and welcome to the Book Nook. Now today I am just going to crack on with my April wrap-up. Now I've kind of split it into two sections because April was quite a graphic novel heavy month for me, and what I'm going to do at some point when I have a little bit more energy, because I'm very tired at the moment, is I'm going to do a sort of graphic novel video, because this month some of the graphic novels I read were sort of quite far along in a series of graphic novels, so I'm going to do a video talking about all of the series of graphic novels that I've been getting into as a sort of, this is how I got into graphic novels. But I am going to mention all the ones that I read this month. So here is my lovely big stack of graphic novels that I read this month. Now the first one I read this month is one that I've been very excited about and was waiting for, and as soon as I saw we had it in the shop I bought it and took it home and read it, and that is Saga Volume 7. If you're a Saga reader and you've been thinking that maybe volumes sort of 5 and 6 have been a little bit less than amazing compared to the first ones, this one starts getting back into its stride and it's really good. So I loved this one, so that's one that I started with. Then I read Paper Girls Volume 2. I'd read Paper Girls Volume 1 just in late March. Well, that is earlier. Earlier than April is late March. So that's when I read Volume 1. So Volume 2 I read at the beginning of April, and it continues. I'm a little bit confused with all the timey-wimey stuff, with all the time travel-y stuff, but so I think I need to reread Volume 1 and 2 in one sitting. But the 80s vibe is still just amazing, and the characters are funny and brilliant, so yes, Volume 2. When is Volume 3? Does anybody know? I haven't heard anything about Volume 3 and I need it, because as confused as I am, I need Volume 3. So that's another one that I read. Two that I read in quite quick succession of each other is Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Lumberjanes. Now I've been hearing a lot about Lumberjanes, partly because Noelle Stevenson, who wrote Nimona, wrote these, and I've been very excited about them, and they're so lovely. They're so warm and just lovely. Just lovely. They're lovely. They're a bit lovely. The characters, as I say, are absolutely brilliant. There's something in there for everybody. So I picked up Volume 1, read it, went into work the next day and picked up Volume 2 because I was lucky and it was there waiting for me, so it was like a sign, so I kind of had to, so I did. And they're really good. So another one that I read this month, which I will talk about more when I do a full-on graphic novel video, because I have thoughts on this one, is Y the Last Man Book 1. Now it's written by Brian K. Vaughan, who writes Saga and Paper Girls, so I was really excited and just assumed I would love it. And the premise is really clever. It's basically all of the men and every male of every species of anything has just died, apart from one guy called Yorick and his monkey called Ampersand. And so it sounded really intriguing, you know, a world where all the men have died and women have got to function in a society on their own, and what's the significance of this one guy and his monkey that are still alive, and the scientific ramifications, and trying to find out. I was intrigued, but I have thoughts. It wasn't, like, bad, but I'm wondering if it gets better. As I said, I have thoughts. I have many thoughts, which I will delve into more when I do a proper graphic novel video. That is another one that I read this month. Then I read March Volume 1. Now this is written by John Lewis, of course not of UK retail shop fame, you know, the really important one, the congressman, the American congressman who has been involved with the civil rights movement for like all of his life, that one. This one was written by him in connection with Andrew Aydin and Nate Powell, and it is essentially just a history of John Lewis and how he got involved with the civil rights movements, his involvement with the student protests in diners, which sort of kick-started his involvement and his meeting Martin Luther King Jr., and it's just really good. And the art style in this one is absolutely gorgeous. It's these black and white sketches that are so vivid and so well rendered on the page that a couple of times I kept on thinking it had been smudged, but it's just the smudge of the original sketch, which just lends it this real, I don't just want to say authenticity, but you know what I mean. It makes it feel more palpable and more real and properly... Oh, I'm bad at words today. Either way, this one was really good, and I'm going to pick up Volume 2 and 3 as soon as I can. The last graphic novel I read this month is Volume 4 of a series that I absolutely love, and that is Giant Days. Now this is a series all about 3 girls who are at Sheffield University, and Volumes 1, 2 and 3 were dealing with their first year, so it was essentially split into the 3 terms. And in this one they are trying to find student housing rather than halls, and it's just absolutely brilliant. Again, the characters in this one, I love all 3 of them, and the supporting cast of characters are absolutely wonderful. So even though Volume 4's just come out, can I have Season 5, please? Again, Season 5! What is with me? Volume. So even though we just had volume 4, I would really like volume 5 because it's just, I love it. So next up, onto the books. Now I'm going to confess I've confused myself a little bit because since I started this channel I've kind of filmed a few almost sort of practice videos and then intended to use them, and I've got a bit confused over which ones I have used and which ones I haven't used, and they've all stuck in my head. So I apologise if some of these I have mentioned, which I should have done because I should have mentioned them in my April haul. So the first one that I read this month was Record of a Night 2 Brief by Hiromi Kawakami, and I absolutely adored this one, especially the first of the 3 stories that are in here. So it's 3 stories. The first one is called Record of a Night 2 Brief, the second one is called Missing, and the last one is called A Snake Stepped On. All 3 of them are these weird, slightly surreal stories, but the first one for me, I don't know what it was. It felt, I did a creative writing MA, and the kind of writing that I like to do was the kind of writing that I like to read, which was this weird, slightly surreal, not really knowing where you were. And I think the reason I loved the first story in this one is essentially because I wished that I'd written it, and it was exactly what I've always been trying to write, and it was so perfect and just perfectly pitched. The imagery was just incredible, the tone, you just sort of didn't know where you were and what was happening, what was real, what wasn't. And it's just fantastic. The other 2 stories in there I did enjoy, but I think I was so bowled over by the first one that I think I might actually have to go back some point and reread Missing and A Snake Stepped On to fully appreciate those, because I was just so in love with the first story that the other 2 were just sort of, yeah, okay, but can we get back to the first one already? If you like your fiction a little bit weird, a little bit edgy, a little bit surreal, this one I cannot recommend highly enough, and it has made me want to go and read Strange Weather in Tokyo ASAP, because if it's anything like the first one, or even if it's not, I just am absolutely in love with this writer's style. So this one I would highly recommend, go out and grab it. Now, I've read Spring Garden as well in the Pushkin Press Japanese novella series, and I'm very excited to read Slow Boat, which is the 3rd one, and I'm going to get round to that one this month. And I believe there's another one coming out, as I say, which is about ice cream sandwich or something. I'm going to have to look into that more, because I'm going to need to have all of these looking so pretty on a shelf, and just, I've loved both of them that I've read so far. So I would really recommend, if you can get hold of them, pick up the Pushkin Press Japanese novella series. Go read this one, it's wonderful. Next up, I read Linda Grant's Of the Dark Circle. It's Bailey's shortlisted, and I told myself I wasn't going to read the Bailey's long list when it was announced, because I'd read, I think, about 4 or 5 on the long list, and I thought, right, as the shortlist is 6 books long, I'll wait until the shortlist and see how many I'd read, and typically only 2 of them that I'd read made the shortlist, so I've got some work to do. So I started with The Dark Circle, and it's absolutely fantastic. So I talked about this one in my haul, and the atmosphere of 1950s London is just so dreamily done. The characters are just astonishingly well written, they are so vivid, they just jump off the page, and I absolutely loved this one. Having said that, towards the end, I think it almost felt like there was a bit missing. I don't know why, it's not a book, as I say, where a lot happens. It's very atmospheric, very evocative, and then a thing does happen, and then it kind of jumps to like after it, and I feel like I missed a little bit in there, and needed a little bit more of what happened in that intervening period. It didn't really diminish the experience of reading the book, so I'd absolutely recommend this one. Now, when it comes to the Baby's Prize shortlist, I have now read Dark Circle by Linda Grant, The Power by Naomi Alderman, Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien, and First Love by Gwendolyn Riley. I've got a big chunk of time off coming up after my birthday, yay! So I think I'm gonna definitely read those last 2 Bailey's ones and have a little think about which one I want to win, which one I think will win, and which one I think shouldn't have been on the shortlist, but I think I may have even already read that one. But anyway, Linda Grant's The Dark Circle, can absolutely recommend it. Go read it. The last 3 that I'm going to quickly talk about are the ones that I read as part of Cozy Reading Night. Now, as you will have seen from my Cozy Reading Night TBR, I had intended to sit down with some non-fiction and spend some proper time with particularly Nasty Women and read a chapter of Sapiens, but to be quite honest with you, I was so tired. I'd got home from work, it was a very long day in the cafe, and I was just absolutely exhausted that I decided I couldn't quite hack some non-fiction. I wasn't in such a thinky frame of mind, and also I fell asleep, so only for like 20 minutes, but I was just so warm and cosy with the blankets, and I'd had some chocolate, and the fire Netflix was going on, so I had a little nap, just a brief little nap. But I did read 3 of the books that I was really excited to read. The other one I didn't read was The Helios Disaster, but the 3 I did read, and I was really pleased I did, was The Iron Man and the Iron Woman by Ted Hughes. Now, I loved these. The Iron Man I absolutely loved. I don't know whether it's the illustrations in this particular edition as well. I have a real thing for the tactile experience of books, and I think that was part of what I absolutely loved about this edition of the Iron Man and the whole reading experience of it, because for me, this is just a perfectly formed little book. It's not too thin, the paper is just right, the cover is lovely, the illustrations are gorgeous. It's as a tactile object, and I think I will do a video about this at some point in the future. As a tactile object, I'm a huge fan of this one, and I think that's why my reading experience of it was so good as well. I think if I'd read it as a kid, like, I would have loved the story, but reading it now in cozy reading night with the lovely atmosphere that I'd sort of created in my little book nook, it was just fantastic to read, and it was really sweet as a sort of fable. It's absolutely fantastic, and the illustrations, I'm just going to find you one of my favourite ones in there. This one, I just absolutely loved, and it really, when you're reading it and you're reading this stage in the story and you come to this illustration, it's just perfect, and it just made me a bit like, oh. If you haven't read The Iron Man by Ted Hughes, I can absolutely recommend reading it. It'll only take sort of 10-15 minutes, it's not a long one. And it's just a really quite intense for a short little kid's book. It's wonderful. The Iron Woman. Now this one is more concerned with sort of environmental concerns. The Iron Woman essentially wants to punish man for polluting the environment, and this little girl has to say, okay, I get that, but can you please not kill my dad as part of it? The illustrations in this one, again, are really good. They're not by the same artist, and they're a little bit sort of more detailed, and I don't quite want to say more realistic than in The Iron Man, but I think that's possibly the closest I can come to describing it, and I think I preferred the illustrations in The Iron Man, but again, they're really nicely done in here. The sort of powers of greed and consumerism and environmentalism, which I think is still very relevant today, is an absolutely wonderful little tale. The last book that I started reading on Cozy Reading Night is Luke Kennard's Cain. Now, I started reading this and got about halfway through when Cozy Reading Night finished, and I was going to go and read some more straight away afterwards, but then I fell asleep. But I stayed up and I finished this one last night, and it is absolutely amazing. This one, essentially, I really wasn't sure what to expect. Having read the blurb and having looked at it, I wasn't expecting what I got, to put it this way. I can't quite put my finger on why, but the book that this most reminded me of was Max Porter's Grief is a Thing with Feathers. I don't know if it's because the way both books take something that's kind of quite already established in literature, be it Ted Hughes poetry or, you know, the Bible, and play with that in a way that it relates to one man and one man's experience of it. That's the only way that I can put my finger on that it reminded me of it, but there were other things about it that just... I got similar feelings reading this one as I did to reading Grief is a Thing with Feathers, but only more so. Some people who read poetry like it quite traditional, and that's fine. I am a big fan of experimentation as long as it doesn't go too far and becomes a little bit wanky, and this gets the balance just right. So it's essentially the central sequence in the middle. Now, when I described it in the haul video, I was just reading from the blurb and didn't quite understand what it meant. But having now read it, it's incredibly clever. I'm just going to take the dust jacket off because every time I move the book it makes a squeaky noise. First thing in the central sequence that it starts with, it's got the page here, and it's Genesis 4, 9-12. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. And then it's got the list on this side here of all the letters that are in that. So it's 355 letters, 42 E's, 24 A's, you know. It's got the list of how many times the letter reoccurs. So the poems within this section, the 31 poems, then use those 355 letters to create these little poems. Now the poems themselves are episodes of a TV show called Cain, about Cain, from the Cain and Abel Bible story, Father Kay, who is Luke Kennard, and another character called Ada, who I can't quite figure out who she's meant to be. With each episode, or each poem, it's got this red text around the outside, which is essentially a commentary. You know how there are a lot of websites now out there that will dissect each episode of a TV show, and people will do kind of catch-ups, recaps, what have you, and talk about the episode and their feelings about it and how it links with the series and what have you. Each one of the episodes, or the poems, has got its own one of that sheds light on how the anagram poem is actually supposed to have played out on screen, but then it keeps referencing the fact that the script writers of this fictional TV show were constrained by the anagrams. So it's not just a construct that Luke Kennard's gone, okay, well, I'll do these poems and pretend they're episodes. He's echoing that constriction through to this fictional scriptwriting team and making something absolutely wonderful out of it. It really is fantastic. Again, I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, because maybe talking about it, maybe it sounds a bit wanky. And yeah, in theory, it is a bit wanky. The way he pulls it off is fantastic. I was silently roaring with laughter sat in my chair here and finishing it up in bed last night, because it's just so perfect. Aside from anything, it's incredibly clever that he managed to get 31 poems out of 355 letters. But the fact that he's then constructed this world around those poems, and it's a cohesive thing, and there's a story in there, because the commentary on each episode also talks about the story behind the scriptwriting team and the producers and the conflict there. The whole way through, it was reminding me slightly of a poetically twisted Community as well, the TV show. I don't know, maybe I'm not selling it very well, maybe it doesn't sound like your cup of tea, but that's absolutely fine. The two sections of poems, either side of it, are just equally fantastic. They speak of something inside that Luke Kennard / Father K is trying to understand about himself and his own life and how things have ended up this way, and it does it in such a powerful way, but it never loses any impact. Just because it's funny, it doesn't become any less impactful. I quite enjoy any kind of literature that pokes fun at itself. I'm a fan of the meta, what can I say? I like things that try and deconstruct itself, play with its own form, nod to other innovations and stylistic choices, and for me, this just ticks so many boxes, but it's also funny and warm and human, and please go read it. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm going to be recommending this to everybody, and I'm going to be rereading it at least a couple of times again this year, because I think there's so much in there, and I want to reread Kane, the series, because it's brilliant. Luke Kennard's Kane poetry collection is so much more than a poetry collection. It's a story, it's an experience, it's a TV show in there. Go read it, go get your hands on it now. Now. The last book that I'm going to include in this wrap-up is the one that I'm currently reading, because there's only a few days left of April, and that is Maggie O'Farrell's This Must Be the Place. I expect to finish this one by the end of April, so I thought I would just include this in my April wrap-up as well. Thanks very much for watching, guys, and joining me in the Book Nook for my first wrap-up video. That was fun, wasn't it? If there were any of the books in this video that you've read and you want to talk about, chat with me down in the comments below. Any of the books that you haven't read and you want to know more about, or you're just thinking that I've sold it quite well and you want to read about it and you want to tell me about it, again, go comment down there, in this general area. As I mentioned, I'm going to film more of a graphic novel overview video. I will do that at some point, if that would be cool. If you think that idea sucks, tell me. If you think it's brilliant, tell me. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I will see you soon.